Hello, friends. My name is Steve, and we are here today for the Friday Conversation episode 79, I think. 79. So, thanks everyone for being here, and we'll go around the room and have everyone introduce themselves. Janny, will you start us off, please?
I'm Janny Wurts, author, illustrator, and really happy to be here in company of my fellow people from the Page Chewing Forum.
Nice. Glad you can make it. And Susana.
Hello, my name is Susana Imaginário. I write weird mythological fantasy, and I think this is my first Page Chewing episode, so I'm very happy to be here talking to all, also from Page Chewing.
Yeah. Glad you can make it. And Jarrod.
I'm Jarrod from the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel and Page Chewing blog and forum.
Very good stuff. And Jose.
Hi, I'm Jose, who mismanages the Jose's Amazing Worlds channel, and usually can also be found lurking around the Page Chewing forums. And I'm very, very grateful to be here. Thank you, Steve.
Great. Yeah, it's great to have you. And Paromita came back for another week. I'm glad we didn't scare you away.
Hello, everyone. I'm Paromita. I'm just a regular reader, and I'm a member of the Page Chewing Forum, and this is my second appearance.
I guess it wasn't too bad, right? Glad you can make it again.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so, Susana, you recently started your YouTube channel. I wanted to hear your thoughts on what that experience has been like as an author going into YouTube and starting your own channel. What has that been like?
Busy. Yeah, it was a lot more work than I thought it would be, and I'm already behind the schedule. Yeah, it's completely unrealistic, but it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun. I get to talk to amazing people regularly and ramble about things. It's been great.
It is a lot of work, yeah. A lot
Yeah,
of time.
seriously, I need to reorganize everything and lower my expectations.
Yeah, I've been at it for I don't know 8 months now, 9 months, and I'm just having fun with it. I don't try to stress myself out with getting stuff out or what have you. And I like to call it serious fun. You know, you put your effort into it, you do what you can, and you have fun with it. And I've gotten to through that I've gotten to meet great people like you. So it's been really rewarding in that manner.
You have more listeners than you know. I don't subscribe, but I listen to you guys, and you'll never know I was there because right now my Google account won't let me log in without giving way more personal information than I want to. They want to tie it to my cell phone, and I don't get reception here at my house. So it's kind of hard to say, well, we'll send you a text because I'd be 5 days later before I got to it. But yeah, I really enjoy your channel, Jarrod. It's fabulous.
Oh, thank you very much.
I don't know if you guys have found, but I looked at the analytics of my channel the other day, and 87% of my viewers are non-subscribers.
Oh,
So I don't know if that's a general thing or not, but like I mean, ultimately I don't really care, but it's kind of frustrating. If only half of those non-subscribers subscribe, I would reach my 1,000 milestone, and I'll be happy. And that's how I can shut it down and go away.
I don't even know how to look that up.
I was thinking the same thing, but I didn't want to say.
Don't look. Don't look at that stuff.
Don't look,
It's so
yeah.
depressing. It's so depressing. Don't look at it. Just enjoy it, because if you get too deep in the weeds with it, you look at like views and retention, and when people click off, it can really get in your head, and like it's just like
Yeah.
it goes to a different place if you get too
But
deep.
when you make a longer video, like a 20-minute book review or some commentary or something, and you watch the average watch time per viewer, it's like 1.5 minutes. And it's like, why bother?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, see, there I'm ahead because I'm drawing at the same time as I'm listening. So I'll just let the thing run. And if I really like you, I'll let the ads run so you get the money because I'm drawing. So if it takes
Yeah.
time, I could be all day listening to you guys. But when I'm writing, I can't listen to you at all. So I do it now while the artwork is front and center.
Sorry to steer the conversation, but because Janny mentioned about the Google security and all your details and all the stuff. Have you guys started watching the new season of Black Mirror?
No.
I
No.
can't stream. So
The very first episode is about a woman who goes home one night, and in Netflix there's a documentary about her life, like literally her day at work is that night's episode.
oh, nice.
And it turns out that in the last terms and conditions for whatever it was, she just accepted. And in there, they said that they could listen to all your conversations, track you, and turn it into a TV show. And it's a sort of taking the whole privacy thing to the extreme. And
That's why I keep my settings shut off so my browser can't access. And that was a problem. Remember that, Steve? We couldn't figure out my camera wouldn't work. It's because I had the security settings so the camera was shut down. The browser couldn't get in it.
Yeah, what's funny
But
is
yeah,
that,
that's horrible.
what's funny is that like the Amazon Echo, people have those in their homes and they run their smart homes or whatever off, or just play music for me or whatever, and they listen to all of your conversations. Like the Amazon offices swap people's conversations and their own private, what happens in their homes. It's wild, and people know this and they still get it. Blows my mind, but yeah, it's a thing.
yeah, it's like that famous photo of Mark Zuckerberg who had taped over the camera and the microphone of his own computer. And it's like, oh, okay, so there might be some truth to all these stories then.
I tape my camera, but it's only because I sometimes, if I'm recording stuff, and I forget that it's on, or God knows. It's, I just calmer or not too concerned when I see it taped. I don't know. It's crazy, I know.
I quite recommend that. Well, the whole Black Mirror thing is quite brilliant, like from season 1, but the latest one is quite good as well. So if you guys haven't checked it out, give it a go.
Yeah. Is it episodic? Is it like
It's self-contained episodes.
self-contained? Yeah. Right. Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. Like a Twilight Zone type of thing.
Yeah, it's called Black Mirror for a reason. It's sort of taking aspects of society and taking them to the extreme. But it's kind of like an Orwellian sort of dystopia where potentially you could see society going there, and it's kind of showing you where we don't really want to go, but we could end up. So it can be quite. It does get you to think about many aspects of social media, particularly social media these days,
Sure. Yeah.
and stuff like that.
I really enjoyed the credit system one, the season 2 or 3. I forget which one. Where they have a credit system and it's
Yeah, it's like your credit score is tied up to your social media. So if people don't like you, your credit score goes down, and then you cannot get a taxi or you cannot go into certain places. And but they got something along those lines in China already, I think. So it's not as crazy as we would like to think the whole series is.
scary.
Well, my God, people can't even take a bad review. What were they going to do if they have to worry about people not liking them? Just feed your paranoia some fire. Pour gas on it.
Well,
Yeah, well, I can see that happening, the way things are going.
I grew up with a lot of brothers and sisters, so I learned not to care about that stuff a long time ago. It got hammered into my head real young. Trying to please everybody never works.
Yeah, I wanted to get everyone's thoughts on that because the big I don't know, this week's whatever fight is in a nutshell, from what I understand, is there was a reviewer who released a review of a I think an extreme horror book. It was a negative review. The author saw it, and the author dedicated his next book to her, and obviously, to in a mean-spirited way, and to like get back at her or whatever. It was my understanding, because of the bad review. So, I guess there's an argument now over when authors should respond, and also I think there should be a conversation about etiquette of just being respectful, as if you are leaving a review to not make it personal. Not that this reviewer did that, but just in general, just to be kind to each other. Even if a book isn't for you, that's fine. But just I think it's important to just remain civil. But wanted to get everyone's thoughts on that.
I listened to a really beautiful segment of a speech made at a commencement this week. There was a clip, somebody posted it up and popped up in my YouTube feed. And the speaker was talking about how to separate the idiots from everyone else. And he made a lot of jokes about it, but his final line really made sense. He said, I look at the ones who are cruel. Because when they're cruel, they're doing it to harm. Why are they doing it to harm? Probably because they never shut down their survival instinct. They never evolved past the differences that might threaten them. So he said the kindest person in the room is going to be the one that overrode that sense of destroy it because it's different. And they're the ones you can trust. And I thought that was an interesting metric. I had never heard that one before. So yeah, it goes both sides. The authors that are cruel to the reviewers and the reviewers who are cruel unnecessarily to the authors. So there's a different metric by which I'd never seen to measure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree. That's actually quite a nice way to put it. I mean, people are going to be shit to each other. Authors are crap reviewers to authors. The problem is there's not a lot of communication. I think as an author, and then I kind of skimmed through the post earlier. I sometimes I would like to reply, just not to criticize or correct, but sometimes I really would like to ask. Like I had a review that still puzzles me. It was a while back. It started very well. It had references to the book, nothing that would go beyond the first few pages or the blurb. But then it started talking about situations in the book that don't exist. To the point where I was wondering, maybe the reviewer got confused and this is a review for a different book, or maybe it's remembering the plot of another book, which could have happened. I really wanted to ask, honestly, are you sure that review is for this book? But I didn't know how to ask, because any way I would put it, it would come as a criticism or an attack. And sometimes it would be nice to ask those questions, or just, say something. I've heard that people sometimes get worried when the author likes the review, even just a like on Goodreads, and they get, oh no, he's seen the review or something. I don't get it. I mean, I would like to interact more with my readers on that level, and I can't. It's a bit frustrating sometimes.
Well, if somebody reviews a book and they get the book wrong, and it's not the fault of the book, that the text in the book was perfectly clear and most of the other readers get it, you don't need to defend that. The book defends itself. The person who wrote that and didn't read carefully is obviously not paying attention. So just let the book defend itself. Just stand back and let it happen.
Yeah, no, I have those too. Those are fine, but it's just sometimes in that case, I would really like to ask, are you sure?
And you need one of these.
What's that?
It is an F-bomb, okay? It's a Nerf, and you can throw it at the screen and not damage your equipment. Yep, you need one of these.
Taking notes, yes.
And for those listening, Jenny's holding up a little. There's a
It's a Nerf,
I
a
know.
Nerf ball that's made like a grenade with a fuse, and it has a big red F stitched on it in red ribbon. It's an F bomb, you know.
it looks like goes on a Christmas tree. Like have a Christmas tree with F bombs on it. But
No, it was sent to me by another author
Yeah.
who understood what happens when you get and somebody saying something and they didn't read it correctly, or they were out in la la land, or they were injecting something into their veins. You don't know. And you know what? You don't have to care, but that's what one of these is for.
nice.
You can also throw it at the cats, not harm them.
I would wonder too, just even like Susana mentioned, just kind of maybe asking for feedback, just in a what would you have, or maybe asking for specifics, or just a way to just kind of get feedback from a reader. That can, I think, especially in text, just reading a message can, I think most people would feel like it's a combative response, even though it may be just the author saying, "Hey, can you explain to me what you didn't like about this, or what word choice or whatever it may be." So it's tough to get honest feedback sometimes without someone feeling defensive unnecessarily. You may not be meaning for it to be combative.
Back in the days when you didn't have an internet and they used to write you letters, and they would come in your mailbox, or your publisher would forward them to you because there wasn't self-publishing then. I got 2 very nasty letters, and I decided that I wasn't going to challenge these people or be mean to them. But they took their time to spend their postage and in pen and ink write me a letter about how much they hated this story. So I said, okay, I'll write them back. And I wrote, "Dear so-and-so, thank you very much for letting me know how you felt about my book. And I completely respect your opinion, and I appreciated hearing from you." And I mailed it back. The fascinating thing was both of them wrote me again. One of them apologized to me profusely and said I was really having a terrible day and I took it out on you. Had nothing to do with your book. I just felt really crappy and I was going to lash out at something. So I realized, that person was having a worse day than I was and didn't really mean it. They were just hammering on somebody who wasn't there to relieve their feelings. The second person wrote me an elaborate letter about how, as a young girl, her father had come down on her so hard for doing all of the things that I did with language in my story, that she learned never, ever, ever to do that again, that it was bad and it was terrible. And how dared I? And it was nothing about me. It was all about somebody was nasty to her for expressing herself. And the scar was so deep. Here was me getting away with it, and she had to put me back in the box with her to justify where she had boxed her own self in. So that really taught me sometimes there's a huge reason why those reviewers are being the way they are, and they'd never let you see that. But defending yourself against their review is only going to put them into more misery. So I let it go. But that was my most illuminating experience, to see what's on the other side of the fence. You can't know. It could be somebody 8 years old having a tantrum.
Mm-hmm. But you wouldn't know if you hadn't replied. Again, there should be more communication, or people should be more open to communication. It just seems that it just goes one way. So no one learns.
I just
I was
wonder.
wondering.
Sorry, go ahead,
I was
Paromita.
wondering if I could chime in a bit, as purely as a reader, and not as an author at all. So first, just in terms of reading reviews, if the review is not about the book and it mentions the author, I discard it, irrespective of whether it's a positive review or a negative review. If someone says, "Oh my God, I love this author so much and this book is amazing," I'm like, sorry. I mean, it doesn't mean anything. And similarly, this author is terrible because they did X. Hence, I will not support it by blah blah blah. Discard. Personally, as a reader, I believe in complete separation of the art and the artist. And so for me, the work is separate and the author is separate. I am one of those people who would freak out if the author liked my review. I'm not comfortable with it at all.
Okay.
I'm so sorry, but like for me, the author is one person and the work is one person. And once the work is released out into the world, it belongs to me and other readers. Up to the point it is published, it is with the author, it is the author. But once it is out for public consumption, it's like, I think it's mine. And regarding communicating with authors, regarding their work, my position is 70 to 80% of the authors I read are dead.
But you see, once you publish the review, it's out there, so it becomes
Yes.
public, and the
Yes.
author is part of the public, is reading your review, so why can't they like the review? You know, you put your work out there for everyone. You know, it's not, you're not going to block the author, so he can't read it. So you see, it goes back and forth, or it should. It's a cycle.
Sure, but the person I gave a 5-star to Lord of the Rings, Tolkien is never going to see that. I'm never going to know how Tolkien feels about it.
I will never like a written review, and I don't respond to reviews at all on written review sites. I do respond to the people who record and talk about my work. I will thank them. Even if it's not positive, I will thank them, because the recording, the editing, the going through the whole process, and then they are putting their face in front of the public talking about the work. And I thank them for that, because the amount of effort that they put into it is huge.
Mhm.
But as far as written reviews stuck up on Goodreads or any on Amazon, I never like any of that. I just leave that completely alone.
These reviews, how many of them are just quick, actual, just little blurbs, as compared to an actual extensive review? I'm not familiar with Goodreads, so I don't know what's up there. But how many people actually put out a review that has some meat behind it, rather than just a paragraph or something like that? It's a blurb.
Sturgeon's Law. You get all kinds in 90% of anything, so it's all comers.
Yeah, there's a bit of everything. There's
Oh, okay.
one-word reviews, and there's short stories.
Yeah, because a one word is not a review. It's just somebody.
It is, according to Goodreads.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is very handy for people like me that just write single sentences. Still counts.
Okay. All right. I'm just curious.
No, it's not a review. It's a comment on the
It's a
book.
comment.
Proper
Yeah, right,
reviews.
yeah.
But there are plenty of proper reviews. Most reviewers and bloggers post on Goodreads, I think. At least the ones I know.
I don't do reviews at all. I just do star ratings. So book good, book meh, book bad, and if I don't rate it, then it's just book read.
I don't do star ratings. I just put comments.
Okay. Yes, I have read your reviews.
I think for me there are levels, and I think there's two aspects. I think like Janny and Susana mentioned, once your book is out there, if I have paid for it, and I usually do, I always do. I haven't got a free book from any author. Actually, that's not true. One of them. But anyway, the point being, if the book is out there and I paid for it, I can say whatever I want about that book. I've got the right to say so, whether I like it or not. I paid for it, it's there. But I think there are levels. So like, I can crap all over the Wheel of Time, as I have done repeatedly over my life. But Robert Jordan is not going to care, and he's already sold 100 million. He's fine. He's not going to care that little me with a 600 subscriber channel craps over the wheel of time. However, like recently, someone requested that I read their book, some indie author, and I couldn't get past page 40. And I've been holding back from reviewing the book because potentially my impact on that author is far greater than what it could be on Robert Jordan. And even though I didn't like the book, or it didn't work for me, and my reviews tend to be 99% of the time polite and reasoned, I'm holding back from publishing a negative review because of the impact it will have on the author potentially. And I think you can be respectful and still not like something. I have the right to say why. And like Janny said, hopefully the person at the receiving end would be appreciative that your book didn't work for them for X, Y, Z reasons rather than for personal reasons. I think in all of that we can all agree. But I try not to, because I'm having a bad day. I don't decide to crap all over any book I'm reading. I always try to reason why. But I differentiate who am I reviewing. If it's Robert Jordan, I don't care. But if I pick one of Susana's books, or if I pick Robert Bone, who I had a conversation with, or this other person that emailed me, I want to be a lot more careful about what I say or don't say, because the impact.
You have a channel, don't you? You have a channel.
That's
What
right.
if you didn't give an opinion at all, but just pick a paragraph and read it aloud on your channel and mix it with paragraphs from other books so that one didn't stand out? Then let your viewers decide for themselves.
I think
That would at least give them something for sending their postage. I don't know, that just came to my head. I wouldn't recommend that. I mean, I would never want to feel that a reviewer had to put something up there if I ever gave them a book. But that might be one way to just be impartial about it. Give them a sample.
yeah, I mean, it's an idea. It's something I wouldn't have thought about. I think sometimes it's a case of style. I actually emailed this author. I said, look, I didn't like it for these reasons. It didn't work for me. But I think the English, the writing was sound. It was solid. It was well written. It's just that jumping straight into the action without any description of any kind, without any motivation for the characters, without any background. Like, I didn't know who these characters were. Were they related? Were they just friends? Why did they end up accepting the quest that was imposed on them? It was just like action, set piece. And you get to page 40 and you're diving into the quest and you don't know anything about the world or the characters, and I just couldn't.
Reading is such an individual thing. Let me give you an anecdote about my agent. Or I was on a panel, actually. I was moderating a panel with a bunch of agents. And I said, I want to hear about the most regretful situation you ever put yourself in. What was the thing that you regret the most in your career? And one agent raised their hand and said, I once received a manuscript from Danielle Steele. And I wrote her back and said, lady, you can't write your way out of a paper bag. And he said, if I'd only been quiet, I'd be a millionaire. So, one person's joy is another person's horror. You really can't judge.
I think I've read about 3 Danielle Steele books that I used to sort of steal from my mom's top shelf, but just to prop fun at them, and those very contrived and repetitive descriptions of what the males used to look like and stuff like that. But thrills and spills, different people get different joy.
She sold enough copies. Somebody loves it.
Yeah, absolutely.
The only time I read a Danielle Steele book was because I was at a family gathering and it was so damn boring I wanted to hide, and that was the only thing on those people's shelves.
And you were just saying, 40 pages of action, that didn't work. I'm sure there could be someone listening going like, oh, that sounds amazing. You know, so as you know, speaking for myself, if someone is doing a review and the book doesn't work for them, just a simple, explain, well, I have this book, doesn't work for me. And if they make an accurate description of what it is, it's about this, and that, and there's an accurate description, that even if it's saying doesn't work for me, it's not my cup of tea, I don't like it, someone else might be watching and thinking, oh, that sounds interesting. I mean, even bad reviews can be good, as long as you're not attacking the author. Again, along with what Paromita said, and I say this a lot, reviewer should review books, not authors. And more, there's reviewers reviewing authors, or the two together. They can't differentiate the two. It's I love this book, you should read it because the author is so nice. Yeah, no, that doesn't work for me. That makes me very angry sometimes.
Yeah, that doesn't, I mean, I don't understand it at all. And I do agree with Jose that I do the same thing. One thing is I'm not a content creator at all. So even more, I'm able to revel in my anonymity. But I do have a policy that if a book has less than 500 ratings on Goodreads and my personal rating out of 5 stars is not 4 or 5, I don't rate it. I just leave it as read because at least it will not pull down the average. I mean, 500 is anyway quite high, but I mean, yeah, the 100 or the 50 reviews kind of things, even nonfiction, I will not rate it. Because who knows which ones other people look at.
Personally, I hate ratings. I always have hated ratings because they don't tell you anything. All they do is give you a predisposed, predigested opinion that has nothing to back it up. And I grew up, I guess, differently because there was no internet. There was no public area to go look at reviews, or you didn't have this 8 to 80 and all these people. You'd get a newspaper review or you'd get a reviewer who was a professional, and often they didn't put their name to it, but it wasn't this general public free for all. And as a result, you relied to pick your books on browsing. You
That's right.
read excerpts, you went to the bookstore, you actually made your opinion, preformed your opinion by the actual words on the page. So you didn't digest somebody else's thoughts on it ahead of time. And if I could set my social media up not to see anything about a book that I was going to buy, or could I screen everything out on any book I hadn't read yet, I would do it in a heartbeat because I like coming to the page, just me and that book, nobody else in between me and that page. So I find today's practice of ratings and reviews all over the place and people putting likes all over it horrible because it stops free thought. You don't get to have that clean interaction of how do you actually feel without everybody else's opinion all over it before you've even had a chance to crack the spine.
Yeah, it takes a certain level of discretion to separate the book you're going to read with it from all the media surrounding it, so that you can go into a book, like you said, without knowing too much about it, being surprised by it, and being wowed by the words behind it. Because I remember the days of going to the bookstore and browsing, for what I wanted to read next. I had no pre-information prior to walking into that bookstore. And sometimes you'd have a really cool cover that would stand out to you, and you read the blurb and you hope it's good enough. And sometimes you go towards something that you might be predisposed towards if you've read that author before. But yeah, separating all the stars and the thumbs ups and all that stuff, and making sure that the book you're gonna read is actually what you want to read. Because I'm very choosy about the books I read. I don't stray too much, and I know. So that's why I pretty much all my reviews are fairly positive, because I know I'm reading something that I want to read. And that's just always how I've read books.
Yeah, that walking up and down the shelves at the library, thousands of books,
Sure. Yeah.
and pulling the one off the shelf and looking at it and actually going, is this something I want to check out? And knowing you can only take a stack that you can carry. So I miss that. I really, really do. I mean, I love social media and I love all of everything that's going on. I mean, it's put me in touch with some things I may never have seen, but I miss that clean take.
It's something I was talking to my wife about. Like recently, I went to London and I went to Forbidden Planet, which to me is one of the best bookstores in the world. And I came back home empty-handed, and my wife was like, "Oh, didn't you find anything you liked?" And I was like, "No, I found loads, but I can't spend every all the money on everything that I liked." And I remember growing up in a small town in the south of Spain. For a long time, there was only one sci-fi and comics bookstore. So you used to go there, and the guy got to know you, and he would recommend you, or check out that comic, or check out that book. And I really miss those times of just going to the bookstores and just going through the aisles. And some of the books I've enjoyed the most have been the ones I picked up off a bookstore shelf, not knowing much about it, just reading the blurb, seeing the cover like Jarrod. Covers are so generic these days, but back in the 80s, those covers were truly works of art by themselves. I always harp on about the Dragonlance series, but those covers make calendars for years and years and years. Some of the books I've enjoyed the most have been the ones I didn't know anything about, and my biggest disappointments have been the ones that everyone has harped on about. Brandon Sanderson, the Mistborn trilogy, or Wheel of Time. When everyone oversells you something, you go in expecting the best things in Lord of the Rings, and inevitably it just falls short of expectations.
Malazan.
Some of my favorite reads, believe it or not, were beyond just browsing and finding something and stumbling over it. Some of my most astonishing favorite reads that have lasted to this day, and it wasn't just because I was young and it was a novel, or it wasn't just because they were books that I took out of the library and I couldn't go back to the library for another X number of weeks. So I had to read what was there. And I probably started out some of my favorite books and hated them for the first 25%, even 50%, even 75%, until I reached the end and I realized, oh my God, the author was doing something amazing. And that totally changed my opinion of a book. And so it was the inaccessibility of books that actually forced me to read things that, because there was nothing else available, or I got it off my parents' bookshelves and there wasn't a trip to the library because I didn't have a driving license yet. And we had moved and we weren't in walking distance of that library anymore. So often the books that have been the most memorable have been ones that if I had had total free choice and the ability to DNF and stop, I'd have missed completely some of the most amazing reads in my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we didn't have a bookstore. We had a little kiosk, just a few, pulp novels, and then one day they start getting from the Penguin's classic collection. I mean, it wasn't something that I expected to read, but they were there, and I could afford them, and I needed to practice my English, and that's how I started. I would read anything. Even sometimes, I don't like this one, but you keep reading and you find something you'd like. I think now we are spoiled for choice. I am a lot fussier about books, and it's very easy to, I'm not enjoying, I'm just going to stop here and here's the next one because I have 100 on the Kindle. Yeah, sometimes I miss the old days, but I like being spoiled as well. So just contradicting myself now. Yes, just pick and choose the best.
For me, it's like interesting. I'm totally different to most of you in that I need to know as much about the book as possible before I start reading it. Like, you can tell me the whole story. If it's a murder mystery, you can tell me who killed the person. And if it's a good book, I would still like it. And if it
No.
doesn't work for me, then usually it's like this. But I agree there are exceptions where, I mean, one of the exceptions that I remember very fondly was Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, because the first part with the private drive and the Dursleys, I was like, what is this? And then suddenly Hagrid, like, I'm spoiling Harry Potter, but I hope it's okay. Anyway, the Hagrid crashes the door open, and then, there was magic. So, but that's very rare. I mean, that has rarely happened in my life. Or Name of the Wind was like that for me after a long, long time, because I didn't know exactly what was going to happen, but I liked it a lot. But most of the time now, I try to find out as much about the book as possible before I try it. And with DNFs, I'm a hypocrite. Like, if it's a newer title, I DNF faster. If it's a classic, I mean, classic means it's just old, I keep going. Because I'm like, so many people liked it, maybe there is something for me.
I keep a
But
baseball bat handy for people who are going to spoil a book, a movie, anything. I don't want to know anything about that book. I don't even want to read the blurb. I want to let the words take me there without any preconception, because that is the experience. It's like knowing the end of your life before you get there. But we're all different.
Oh yeah.
Paromita, what do you look for when you look into a book? How do you decide which ones to read and which ones not to?
Which ones to read? If people praise the writing a lot, and if people, I mean, it depends a bit on the subgenre, but if it's usually the first thing is if people praise the writing a lot. If the premise sounds interesting, there's something a bit offbeat about it, or it's a new take on something which has been done to death, but somebody's looking at it differently. So something like that. Other than that, sometimes when it's, booktubers or reviewers whose writing style I like a lot, if they recommend a book or if they have liked a book, I immediately pick it up. There are some people with whom my reading tastes align. And my mom, generally, whatever she recommends, I will at least try. So she was like my reading guide when I grew up. That's it, really. I mean, that's one of the reasons why my Goodreads average is so low. I'm very ready to experiment with almost anything. I'm not but yeah, I just need to know what the book is about before I go. I don't like being surprised too much.
Yeah, I'm this. I like to go into things not knowing anything, and if something gets spoiled for me, then I'm like, I'm not gonna read that book. I'm not gonna watch that movie because I know how it ends.
Yeah, no spoilers for me as well. If you want to see me upset, yeah, no spoilers.
Yeah, that happens.
With one exception, I could not get through the movie Alien without people who'd seen it 5 times before to tell me when to hide my eyes. I hate horror.
I had that with Life of Brian. I had a friend that told me so many times to watch that movie. But in the process, he told me every single joke in the movie. So by the time I watched, I was like, that was it? That was it? What was the point? I knew every joke, I knew every punchline, I knew every situation. It's like, what a waste. I got a question, sorry, for Janny. Because obviously you've been in the business for a fair amount of time. You must have seen the changes in the industry. And it's my perception from the outside completely that obviously with computers and self-publishing being in everyone's reach now, I think I talked to Susana about it a few weeks ago, that these days there's more people writing, or at least more people being able to put their work out there at a time when people are reading less and less. the attention spans have been compressed by social media. I said at the school that I teach, when I was a kid, I used to read fantasy books, and there would be a couple of people I could trade books with or have conversations with. These days at school, you see a kid reading, guaranteed he's the only one in class that is carrying a book around. So is that a fair assessment of the situation with there's more people trying to publish at a time with maybe declining readership or sales?
I think it's always been said that 4% of the people have 100% of the books. And when I was growing up, I would have maybe a couple of friends who were readers and the rest of them were not. I mean, that hasn't changed. That equation hasn't changed. But now there is a great deal of signal to noise and a lot of pressure. Life is more complicated. You know, people are on their phones all the time. They're talking to their friends all the time. You don't have those big blocks of time where you couldn't communicate with anyone and you had to amuse yourself. And I think, you know, now that there's streaming and there's unlimited television, that the equation is constantly shifting. Is it different? I don't know. I watched very traditional times when we had 26 publishers of science fiction and fantasy before all these mergers collapsed, and there was majorly more original work. It wasn't necessarily the work that is remembered now because the press runs were too small and those books have disappeared. But the percentage of authors that got their start at that time, most of them have vanished. They're gone. They're completely forgotten. I've got books upstairs that I can guarantee I can mention authors' names you'll never have heard of. And they were doing what would be considered today very modern fiction. But it wasn't the vogue back then. It wasn't what the mainstream reader was reading. So there aren't enough of them for you to be even aware that they were there. So it's always been a cutthroat business. Any kind of entertainment is fickle. So much depends on luck. So much depends on the right timing. So much depends on word of mouth. Word of mouth is still the most powerful driver. So, you know, I don't know. All I can say is it's never been easy. It has never been simple. So now we have lots of people that can roll the dice and try and put their stuff out there. How many are going to be there in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years? And my response to that is always to the creator, do it anyway, because it isn't up to us who are alive what gets remembered and what doesn't. It's always determined by people after we're dead. And if you don't do that effort, if you don't create what you were born to do, nobody will ever have that story, and you've sunk your ship before it even set sail. So that's my attitude, is that it has never been easy. And so people looking back and saying it was simple back then, no, it wasn't simple back then. There were still more failures than there were successes. So just do it anyway. Get the stuff out there anyway. Try your luck, because if you don't, you'll never know. And it won't be us. It'll be the next generations after us that determine what survives and what doesn't. So how does it matter? While we're alive, how does it matter? It doesn't. Go back to what Gandalf said. It's how you use the time you're given. That's it. It's your choice.
Yeah, I wonder how, you know, before the advent of social media and all that stuff, I wonder how many people read because there wasn't another avenue of something to do during those times, or you know, have a sense of boredom, productive boredom, maybe.
I don't see it as being that different.
Yeah,
I still
well,
see all of my friends and neighbors don't read.
they don't read, exactly. Well, I didn't read when I was a kid either. I didn't read until I got older, like in my late teens, early 20s, and there weren't that many people in my high school reading either. There was a few here and there, and I wonder if today the percentage, like you were talking about, the percentages of people reading, and I'm wondering if it's similar, and I wonder if some of the media that's, you know, exposes people to these properties might have a say in whether the people who read books are reading because they're exposed to some of the adaptations and what have you, and if it's balancing out at all compared to how it used to be.
Well, we're ruled by the algorithm. Totally.
Oh yeah.
People don't want to acknowledge that, but it's true.
Oh yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah.
Here's the biggest shift that I've seen. I don't see a percentage of fewer or more people reading. I see just as few people reading as when I grew up. It's not the average person who reads extensively. The difference that I see is once you crossed the bar and you got yourself published, which wasn't ever an easy bar, it was never easy. Once you crossed that bar, the publisher earned their keep. They had a marketing department. They actually proofread the books. They actually edited the books. They actually worked with your career. They worked with your books one after the next to establish your career. That's gone. That's just gone. The writer only wrote. So you wrote the book, you turned it in, you did your revisions if you got an edit, then you did your proofing, then you enjoyed the fact, here's your book. And the publisher did the job of getting it out there and marketing it and shepherding your career along. Now, pretty much, you're expected to do the marketing too. You're expected to maintain a website. You're expected to maintain social media. You're expected to do your cover reveals. The list gets longer and longer and longer to the point where practically you're doing all the work, except you're not shipping it to New Zealand, right?
I see a
That's
lot
why I chose to self-publish.
I see a lot more in the comics industry because I try to go to a couple of Comic Cons at least every year. And particularly when I was in the UK, I would do the circuit. I would do like the south of England, Portsmouth, London. I might go up to Manchester, maybe Birmingham, and you will see the same faces at every con throughout the year. The same indie publishers that were writing, drawing, printing, binding, shipping, and they were peddling their wares all around the country. It's almost like drawing and writing comics is what they did in their spare time between conventions. And I think now authors as well need to be, or aspiring authors need to have that sort of backpacking spirit of, load in your trunk with boxes of your books, go to conventions, sell your wares, put on your marketing cap on, smile to people, and do the marketing that Janny was talking about as well.
But that's all time you're not going to be writing.
That's right. That's
And
right.
see, there's the difference. You could devote all of your time to writing the books. Now, I didn't enjoy that for very long because the changes started coming very fast and have accelerated tremendously. But, the year when I came on board, the phase where you had an editor and you had the same editor for your entire career, you might work with the same editor for 40 years. That was gone by the time I stepped in. So, yeah, the changes definitely have been huge, and they're coming faster and faster. Now we're facing AI. So they're back to reviewing. How do you know that wasn't an AI written review? You have no idea. So why waste your time?
Susana, I know you self-publish your series. What percentage of time do you spend writing, and what percentage? How is your time divided between writing and promoting and marketing your work?
I always try to prioritize the writing. That being said, this year I'm not publishing anything. I took the year to just, rest, take a break, revise a few projects, and just promote. So right now, I would say 80-20. I still write, but very little. But in the beginning, and when I published the first 3 books, I was pretty much just writing, which was kind of a mistake. I mean, I had no following. I did no marketing. I thought that if I invested in the books, that eventually, that would be enough. Because I don't think I do a good job promoting myself or my work. I don't have the personality. For everything I get right, I get like 5 wrong. And yeah, so but to answer your question, when I get back on track, it would reverse. It would be 80-20%, but with 80% writing, because I think that's the way it should be. And if it doesn't sell well, I don't know. I miss writing. But I just had to give it a try. I was like, okay, I'm gonna dedicate myself to try and sell more books and put myself out there. So we'll see.
Yeah, but that's what happened to me when I used to write. And I had like 3-4 books, and I got some kind of co-publishing deal where at least my books, we talked about it, Susana. Like, there was a guarantee that my books would make it to the shelves of the main bookstores in Spain. By the time I wasn't living here, and it's like I haven't got the spirit to go out there and put myself out there and do the marketing and all that kind of stuff. So that's what stopped me from taking that final leap of faith and going after it.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what's required now. I think it's inescapable. You have to put yourself out there. You have to go. So I think next time I'm in London, Susana, for the Comic Con, I expect to see you there with a little stand and a banner. And
I don't think that's ever going to happen. In social media and YouTube channels and ads, that's as far as I go. I'm trying to build up the courage to maybe go to BristolCom. I don't know, just to see,
it's only a couple of weekends a year. You've got Dublin and you've got Bristol just across the sea there. So I'll make it.
The stress, the amount of time, the expense, it's not worth it. To be fair, at this point. Who knows? Maybe one com at a time. I'm really thinking about BristolCon, but so nothing bigger than that.
It's a tough racket. It's the self-promotion and stuff like that. It's a full-time,
so
almost a
crushing.
full-time job sometimes.
Yeah, it's so crushing. But but it does work. Even before this year, like I started noticing whenever I would post something about the books or appear to an interview or just something else, I would get a spike in sales. If I would just take the week off, not post anything, just focus on my books, I would then go and check the sale. I usually check on weekends because there's no point checking every day. And it would just stop, no sales. And so I figured, well, I need to do something if I want to keep writing. Or if I want to keep publishing. I guess there's nothing stopping me writing, but I write so other people can read what I write. And I think stories need to be put out there. Books are meant to be read. It's tough. Yeah.
Which platform? How do you decide where to focus your attention on marketing? Was it a website? Is it a platform? Is it like YouTube? Is it what do you find reaches the most potential readers?
Twitter or X. That's why I'm still there. Instagram didn't work for me. I know it works for a lot of people. Same with TikTok. I guess different audiences. I'm terrified of TikTok.
Are you
Instagram,
a good dancer? You can do TikTok. I see those dancing videos all the time.
I just everything about it. No, that's what I draw the line. No, but I can't explain why. But yeah, the more I tweet, more books I sell. I can see a correlation there. Facebook, yeah, people there only react to memes, pretty much.
Did you ever try recording an extract and putting it up as a podcast? Because you can feature those in the Apple Store for free.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I have. Into that.
I put stuff, I recorded a bunch of things. This was back in the 90s and put them up as a podcast on Apple. They're probably still there. But yeah, once you've created that and you tag it, it might give you another front to try. Can't say it'll work, but
I will look into it. Thank you so much for the tip. Yeah. Definitely do that. I'll take more suggestions.
Were you aware of the weekly quote or weekly word? Who is it? There's a mass mailing that goes out, and it's book QW, I think it is, and they provide a word every week, and every Wednesday you select an excerpt of your book and you publish it using that word, and you use the hashtag book QW, and it goes to all the people who are following that hashtag. But I'd have to look up. I mean, it's on Twitter. It appears on Twitter that you see the authors
QW,
posting, but
okay.
you have to look up and get on the mailing list to get the book of the word of the week. So there's another way to get your excerpts out there under hashtag, because a lot of the authors are using that. So there are
Okay.
little things like that. There's nothing. I've also found if you go on giant book forums and just talk about other books that you love, you talk about other books that you love, nothing else. People will check out your profile. They will check out your profile and they will find your books without you ever mentioning your books at all.
Okay.
But that
But
takes
I will do that
time.
as well.
It's like promoting your book can be a full-time job, isn't it? And like you said before, it's time away from writing. It's almost like you need to come up with a schedule. Monday, Tuesdays writing, Friday, Saturdays marketing, and fit in your life on Wednesday, Thursday, and Sunday. I don't know.
Yeah, if only then my life worked around that schedule so well every day.
How do you get your name seen on our fantasy, which is heavily moderated? They won't let you post your own content of any kind. It used to be I could post you guys booktube channels, but I can't anymore because they take it down because they think I'm being a sock puppet or something. I don't know, meat puppet, whatever they call it. But what you can do is you can post your written reviews there of books you like. And again, people will check you out. You can also, instead of starting a blog and building it up from no people, write an essay and post it there. You'll get thousands of views. The topics cycle very, very quickly, but there's usually probably 5,000 people at a time looking at that forum. And if you write an essay a month, you're never going to get 5,000 people in your own personal blog. But because you post your opinions or your essays, that's going to start to build a name, and they will follow you to your social media. They will figure out that you're a writer. They will figure out they like what you have to say. And you'll just start to build a presence. But yeah, all that takes time. So yeah, why haven't I bothered with a personal blog? Because as an author on Goodreads, I can post my blog there, and I can post on a huge forum that has 2 million followers, which our fantasy does. And I will reach more people, and I don't have to hold to a schedule. So there's another suggestion you could think about, but it takes effort. If you do those things, I do recommend that you take a month and you lurk the forum so you get a feel for the community. You don't want to just plunge in there and start spouting stuff until you get a feel for what the people who are already there and what the tenor of what they're talking about is, so that you don't make the wrong kind of waves. So always get to know your community first. Yeah. If you're going to go in as a poster, that's been a practice of mine since the start. Lurk the place for a month before you jump in with 2 feet, or at least know the people who are running it.
That's excellent advice, and I noted everything you mentioned. Thank you so much. I'm going to be busy. I never thought about it. Yeah, more things to do. But thank you, really.
And they do moderate that forum. It's 2 million people, but they do not permit unkindnesses to happen there. The mods will kick people out or come down on them. They follow their rules very strictly, but self-promotion is a big no. You have to come in there and just contribute, but every single review you do, every written review could be posted there. They allow you to post your reviews, just not the link to the review. You have to put the content on that page.
Right. I have an account. I haven't used it in a very long time. I had the impression people being very angry there. But then again, I was just commenting on other stuff. It never even occurred to me to write my own. You know, that was an option. But yeah, if it is, I'll look into it.
The nice thing is about that in a place like even our fantasy is that you're not beholden to the algorithm, because I think when you get on Twitter or another platform, if you're not consistent, it'll punish you for not being consistent. So if you take a few days off, you could lose the momentum you gain. So then you end up falling back, and it's like you're on a treadmill and you have to keep running a certain pace. And who has time for that? It's exhausting just thinking about it.
If you understand the algorithm of how that forum turns over, you can definitely spring it to your advantage. You want to put up your post right about 11 o'clock Eastern time, between 10 o'clock and noon, because you're going to catch the people coming on the East Coast off for lunch hour. You're going to catch the West Coast people coming to work. You definitely do not want to post there at 9 o'clock at night, because it skews towards North America, and you're not going to reach as wide of an audience 9 o'clock at night, though you will get more California and a little bit more Australia, New Zealand, and sometimes that's a different viewership. In other words, I noticed certain kinds of posts sometimes did better at that hour because there were fewer idiots. You know, the late night crowd is often the ones who stay up late reading, or they watch the esoteric movies. So, you know, lurk the forum for a month and you'll figure it out. But if you want to just sheerly the number of people watching, numbers, you go for that between 10 and noon Eastern time slot, because the algorithm is going to favor you. It'll stay on the front page longer. More people will see it. And so if it's going to rise, that's the time to catch.
In my head, Janny is running computer programs there. She's studied this, she's machine programmed, she's maximized the impact of everything.
No, I've had to do this because I had to survive. I had to survive with no promotion from anywhere since 1995. Zip. It's been me. That's it. So I had to figure out every subversive way that I could contribute to the community and hopefully survive to get this blasted series finished, which I succeeded. Yay, 11 books. But yeah, it's been an uphill battle, and I don't like being the troll that's out there all the time, you know. And so I keep my Twitter feed for my books, and for commenting on other people's books, and for listening and following all the YouTubers. That's my book place, and I will definitely do my promotion there and my announcements there. But everywhere else I go, if it's a general discussion like this or a forum, I will just simply comment on the subject at hand. Other books, you know, I'll talk to other people, but it's not about me then. But it's just a matter of, you do what you have to do, but you also want to give back and pay forward. Book people are the best. And so I've made a lot of friends.
How do you follow that? Who moves the conversation forward now?
Well, I just realized I have so much to learn. Yeah. So.
Yeah, but ain't that the case for everything all the time?
Yeah, true. But that's the thing. I never thought I would be doing this. Not writing. I mean, certainly not this. This is all very new and against all my instincts and things that haven't even occurred to me. Like, again, what would be the more suitable time to post? I know people, you know, track that, but yeah, it wouldn't occur to me. I mean, it's enough work to just have the post out. Okay, I really need to up the bar. Yeah.
Do you love books? That's the question. If you love books, then that
Yeah.
tactic is going to be rewarding because you will be happy to talk about loving books. If you don't love books, then don't do it because people are going to see right through it. I love books. Reading was my escape. It was my pleasure. It was my thrill on top of crazy adventures in the real world. So I have a deep love of books. And so it's effortless for me to hang out with people who have a deep love of books.
Yes, I
So-
love books.
So on an unrelated, somewhat related note, it's like, Steve, like, how long have you been running page chewing? Or I mean, your booktube channel has kind of morphed into something else, but how long have you been doing that?
The forum has been around since 2004. It's taken on different
Oh wow.
different focuses, I guess. But the page chewing came about 2 years ago, I think. Yeah.
So, because like, my question is, to do something right, I mean, or like, how many things can you have going on at the same time to do it right? I mean, your kids are older than mine, but we all got jobs with the exception of Janny, who works on what she loves. We all have jobs. We all have.
I don't have a job. No, I sit around all day eating ice cream and dreaming up stories. That was my sister's opinion of my work.
Exactly. You are on what the Japanese call ikigai. You work on what you love and you do what you anyway. Some
It's
of
a
us,
very small fraction of my life, but anyway, it's a big fraction and it's a small fraction, but anyway.
like we've got jobs, we've got families. Reading is not the only thing I do. I like to do long distance running, and that takes a fair amount of my time. So, like, how many things can you have going on in your life at the same time to actually do them relatively well? Because without spreading yourself too thin.
I guess that's, I don't know. I don't know if I've figured that out yet, but I think it's tricky for sure. But I just love to do too many different things. And I don't know. It's tough, but like the forum especially, it's tough because I it's not something that I can do on my own. I need other people like all of you to help to be a part of it. So it's not something that I can just spend all day on, because if I'm the only person there, then it's like no one's there to listen. So it takes time to kind of foster the right environment and to get people to want to be there and have like a positive place to be, and not, because you could make something really negative and foster that kind of environment, and there's certain people who crave that kind of negativity, and they're drawn to it, but that's not what I want to put out into the world. So it's tricky. So it takes time. It's a long game for sure, especially with something like building a community of like-minded people. It takes time, and you need really great people to help and to be a part of it. So it's tricky. It's tough. It takes time.
Well, you've done a great job. I mean, I was ecstatic to be invited onto the forum, and I have had nothing but positive interaction there, and it's been very, very good place for me to hang out.
Oh, good to hear.
Yeah. That, but as far as finding the time, I think I think people generally have more time than they think they have, and it's just a matter of juggling, using that time wisely to do the things you want to do. It's like you said, we all have jobs, Jose, and we have families and kids and what have you, and so it's life's a balance like anything else, and so then you do the things you love as well as, and if you happen to be, if your job is doing what you love, then that's even a better situation, but not everybody can do that, but it's finding that balance, and that's a good life balance if you can put it all together, and you build that time into your life if you really love it.
Coffee helps.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
And I just don't like being bored. I like to, when I'm just sitting around, I don't like to sit around and do nothing. I just like to have something to do all the time. Otherwise, I drift off into space and get into trouble. So I like to stay busy and do
I
things.
mean,
So.
like, because it's something that I talked about over the summer. Like these days, I actually don't have time to be bored because between job and the kids and everything else, I only get like maybe a couple of hours in the day for me. So those 2 hours, I'm either training or running or reading or editing for the channel or recording. Like I don't until the kids are a lot older. I don't get a chance to be bored anymore. I've got very limited time, but I had to give up things. So I gave up writing, and I gave up a couple of other things because I haven't got time to actually do a decent job of all those things that I enjoy.
That's the thing. Is doing a decent job because you always find time to do something else. But the more stuff you do, then the quality drops. And I just sometimes I look back and I was like, well, I wish I hadn't done that because when I do something, I would like to do it well or to the best of my ability. Yeah, I notice that's the thing with the channel. My plan, I immediately realized it's not gonna work on this schedule. I completely underestimated how much time I would need along with everything else because I keep joining these group discussions. Seriously, it's becoming an addiction. That takes a lot of time as well. So yes, at some point you're just gonna have to prioritize and start saying no and just be realistic, I guess. It's finding that balance. It's so hard. And I'm not just talking about writing or promoting. I'm talking about work and family. Just maintaining your life together. Can't all be a hobby.
Yeah, but you can fill in cracks if you get smart about it. I've watched a lot of my peers raise children. I've watched a lot of people that say, oh, I don't ever have time. And I say, look, what do you do right before you fall asleep every night? What do you do the minute you wake up? If you ask yourself a story question or if you have insomnia, you can work out and then you can jot file cards. You can have a file card in your purse or your pocket. You're at work. That idea hits you. You can go to the John and write it down in the toilet if you have to. And when you get home, you'll have a bunch of file cards. That 10 minutes you're waiting for the bus, that moment where you're waiting and drumming your fingers for a business call or a meeting to start. If you start filling in the cracks with creative ideas, then you can string them together when you get that 2 hours to yourself. But a lot of those 2 or 5, 10 minutes are wasted moments. I mean, my grandfather taught himself to play the piano waiting for my grandmother to get ready to go out. And he became a very accomplished musician by the end of his life.
Awesome.
So we think our lives are too busy, but often there's hundreds of little micro moments that you can fill in the cracks if you gear your mind to use them.
I got a lot of reading done waiting for that.
I used to teach myself to play an instrument while I waited for the teapot to boil so I wouldn't burn the pan.
That's awesome. Yeah. Good advice again. Yeah.
And Paromita, I haven't heard from you in a while. Did you fall asleep on us?
No, I'm awake.
Okay. Want to make sure you just didn't leave us and be like, oh, they won't notice. I'm not here.
I think Paromita puts the most posts on the forum of any single person. So yeah, we would notice if she disappeared.
That's very true. Yeah. So on the forum, our friend Rick from the forum, he has he posted a bunch of questions a bunch of awesome questions that I try to get a couple in every episode. But one of his questions was, well, he has a few questions about rating books that we've already kind of talked about. So one of his questions was, how do authors balance telling the story they want to tell and telling a story that might satisfy the wants of a wider audience? It's a tough one.
No, it's not.
No?
No.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
To the wider audience.
I see this coming.
Write what you want. Yeah.
Yeah.
Write what you were born to write. Write what you want. Because look, how many millions of people are on this planet? Billions. How many does it take to make a hit book? If you sell 100,000 copies of a book, that is a stratosphere, okay? 35,000 is a stratosphere. Most books sell under 2,000 copies or even less. So why are you worried? There are enough people on this planet to support anything you do. I don't care how crazy it is. I mean, the internet will prove that. It's reaching the people who like what you do. That is the key question, not what you should write. What you should write starts here. Then you find the market for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Agree.
I agree
Exactly.
too.
I mean, I wouldn't even know what the market wants. It's constantly changing, and I would probably do a very bad job at it, because if it's not something that I would personally like or even know how to write, a genre or style, yeah, it would be catastrophic. If I'm not going to sell books, I'd rather not sell the books that I enjoy writing, at least.
Who was it last week who posted, or 2 weeks ago, posted something brilliant on Twitter? And they said, if you write something and somebody hates it, make the next thing you write, make them hate it even more, because that's your niche.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, that's my take on writing for the crowd. You can't get inside their head. If everybody knew what was going to sell in advance, they would bottle it and sell it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we kind of know, again, we had this conversation in the forum long ago, topic about writing erotica on the side. I mean, I guess I'm seriously considering it, because it always sells. There's always a market. It doesn't matter how many werewolves or ghosts or I don't know,
Pterodactyls.
even for the classics, because I know there's really strange stuff going out there. Even for the classics, there's always a market.
If there is
So
a
if you
genre,
get really desperate, there's always that option. Okay.
if there's a genre I can't stand, is werewolf erotica. I can't. I do not get it. I cannot believe I'm hearing what I'm hearing. This is I mistrust any book with mud nipples on the cover. Like, that's a big no-no for me. Like, that's a no-go place. What, Susana? Seriously, you are considering?
Not with werewolves. If I ever write, it will be with vampires. Okay.
And it's always every book is a combination. The titles are always going to have the words alpha, male, and pack. So dominated by the alpha male of the pack, destined to be with the alpha of the pack, mated by the alpha
You've been
pack.
reading. You've been reading now.
Because confession time. My wife's addicted to that shit. Which probably says something about me in any case, but yeah, I seriously, I can't stand it. I can't stand it. I do not get it. I do not understand it. And every story, how many times can you be dominated by the alpha of the pack? In how many different ways? Like, it doesn't make sense. I just got a death bomb from Janny, but it's true. Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Okay.
I actually read one. But it were bears. They were werewolves.
Here we got a brilliant idea. Let's write a crime thriller about a canine officer whose dog is a werewolf, alpha male of the pack.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right.
Oh,
That was good.
somebody would buy that book, and somebody would buy that book. They're obviously buying that book because there's so many of them you could drown yourself in them. So, different strokes.
Yeah, but
I'm not going to stand between anyone who wants to read 100 books like that.
Yeah.
And my preference is because you'd probably end up trampled to a bloody pulp.
But we were talking before about Daniel Steele, right? The most successful Spanish writer of all time, piece of worthless trivia for you people, is not the writer of Don Quixote, is not Nobel Prize winner, what was it, Chilean author. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The most successful Spanish writer of all time is this lady called Corinne Tellado, and all she wrote was romance novels by the bucketload back in the 60s and 70s in Spain. And she's the highest selling author ever in the history of the Spanish language. And that's what people consumed by the bucketload. But we don't talk about it, we don't boast about it. We talk about Don Quixote, but no, it's actually fairly tame 60s romance, I don't know. There's certainly a big market for it, but everyone is too embarrassed to admit to it.
Well, I've talked to a couple authors that write erotica on the side and their pen name, and there's a fantasy author that I'm a fan of that he had mentioned to me that he had other projects, and I just didn't ask because it seemed like it was something he didn't want to talk about. But he never told me his pen name, and I had talked to him a bunch of times, and come to find out that he's been writing erotica on the side for under a different pen name, and I guess doing very well because his other projects has been put on hold because he's having so much success writing erotica or whatever it is, romance. So, more power to them, I guess, if they, so it's an option, I guess.
Yeah, but then surely that becomes a job. It's
a job.
Not what you want to write about, maybe. I mean, I'm sure some people, that's what they want to write about. But it must be a bit weird if you set out to write the next big epic fantasy trilogy ever, and you end up writing, the alpha and the beta sort of thing.
Yeah. But if he would get the fantasy trilogy published, you gotta do what you gotta do.
No, because you become the beta guy or the beta woman, like unwanted success. Like, what did you do with unwanted success?
I have no idea. I don't know. I mean, I joke about it, but probably try. And who knows? Maybe I am good about it. Maybe I'll be good at it, and maybe I'll even enjoy it. Yeah, writing is writing. I do like to write smut. Anyway, I always have to include in every book just a little bit of smut. So how hard could it be to just write a little novella?
I'm laughing. Not at you. I'm laughing. He's hiding his face.
Jose doing that.
Jose, yeah, I'm laughing at Jose. Not you. Definitely not you. It's like, Jose, we know how to get your goat, Jose. You realize?
A myth has fallen.
We know how to drive you out of the room.
A myth has fallen. I thought Susana was a serious person. And this admission of enjoying to write smart, I cannot believe I heard. Anyway, all right.
Well, it's true. Sorry to disappoint. Don't read my books then.
No, just send me a direct message with your pen name for your smart, and I'll check that.
Okay, all right. You could be my beta reader.
Beta reader, thank you very much for that. Yeah, I see what you.
Yeah, watch out. She'll write a page and she'll put it at the top, an invisible link. This one's for Jose.
Yeah. So I'm
Give
not
you the
your
dedication.
alpha. I'm not your alpha reader. I'm your beta reader. I get it. I see. I see.
I didn't mean it.
No, it's clear. It's clear. Yeah, yeah.
Man.
Oh, I'm this derailed.
It's derailed.
Steve's just regretting tonight. Sorry, Steve.
No, I didn't catch that until you mentioned it, but pretty good.
Yeah.
That was my intention.
I was going to
I
ask
wish it could be
everyone,
that.
have you actually read some paranormal fantasy or romantasy? Which one have you read, and did you like any of them?
No, it's god awful. God awful. I read. I can't remember what it's called. It's got man nipples on the cover for sure, and it was about werebears, and
Werebears.
there's just this big ice hockey player that in his spare time was a grizzly bear, but obviously, and then she was a werewolf, and then
In his spare time, so he had a choice.
yeah, but it's just that wasn't, and then it was like crap, like it's badly written romance, like you can see where it's going a mile away, but anyway. But when I got to the sex scene, it wasn't even erotic. And then you just know you're in fantasy land when she describes that they go through a 12-pack condom in the space of 4 hours or something like that. It's like, no, mate, like, it doesn't work like that. I don't. This is just rubbish. This really is rubbish. This is really bad. It. I think, I don't know if he was trying to elicit that sort of sense of excitement and arousal and whatever. It just failed on every level. But it must be fulfilling, some fantasy for some people. And without getting too graphical, I don't understand the need for erotic literature in this day and age of the internet when you've got at the click of a button all sorts of stuff in video format. So I just don't understand that. And that's why I'm not big into romance in my books, and I certainly am not into any sex in my books because I don't think it adds anything to the story.
You ever read a 1930s Western by men, written by men? John D. MacDonald? Have you ever read Gore? Have you ever read, I've read all that stuff. Not all the Gore novels, but I read enough of one or two to know what people were talking about. And yeah, I read A Court of Thorn and Roses, and I read This, That, and Yon, paranormal. I read a couple of those. I read a ton of romance writers. If you go to a person who's writing in that field and you say, what are your top 10 reads in that field? The books in the 1, 2, and 3 slots are going to be amazing. They won't be run of the mill. They'll be exquisitely written, superbly written. I once gave a book by Elizabeth Lowell to my dad, and it was pretty much a thriller with romance in it. And he loved it because I had read John D. MacDonald. I'd read Michener. I'd read all the books on his shelf. I said, Dad, I like this book. The funny part was he read it. He loved it. He went to the bookstore and asked for more by that author. And the bookstore person says, like, really? He didn't realize she was a romance writer because that book functioned perfectly well as a thriller with a little bit of sex in it. So, I've read some of the award winners in many genres, all different fields. The top writers in those areas are going to be worth the read. There will be something more than just what you think is there. But do you want to read the entire genre? No, not necessarily. But I would never put down those books because if it's romance and it's for women, I can name you 60 or 70 titles I've read where it's absolutely romance for men. Yeah, read a John D. MacDonald book sometime. And everything is like skimming out of her pantyhose in 5 seconds and they're having whatever over the desk. And over every book, and they're never attached to anybody because every single thriller has a different girl. Okay, they're never women. So anyway, be a little more flexible, but don't necessarily write off the whole genre, because the people who are the top of their field who have won awards often are well worth the read. There's quality anywhere, but that doesn't mean unilaterally, because Sturgeon law. You wouldn't say every single science fiction or every single fantasy book you ever read was worth your time either.
Right. Then your next post on the paid tuning forums should be your recommendation of your top 10 smart books to read.
All right, I'll take you up on that.
Ooh.
I'll take you up on that. I'll give you a list of
I would like to know.
probably 5 top-notch romance reads that are just exquisitely well written and well worth your time. And you may not love them, but you have to look at the craft that went into those books and say, this was an incredible read. The first Nora Roberts work I ever read was like, what was it? Carnal Innocence. It's a murder mystery that takes place in the South. Nora Roberts has now written thousands of romance novels, and she sells so well, she donates all of her money to childcare for people who are working. She's an amazing person. But yeah, Carnal Innocence is just exquisitely well written, beautifully done, riveting. And so you have to say the best of any one genre is worth your time. Just as looking at the top award winners, we wish the literary community would read some of the top science fiction and fantasy books. And I'm not talking necessarily the popular ones, but the really top-notch ones. And they won't give them the time of day. So where do we get off being that prejudiced that everything unilaterally under that umbrella is no good?
I suppose in my case, it's just I don't look for that kind of thing. It's just
I don't look for romance either. But if you ask one of those authors, what is the top 10 books in your field? I think you would revise your opinion that everything is garbage that's coming out of those pens, because it's not. They're writing for a different audience, but the story itself is quality. The language is quality. The way they unfold their craft is just beautifully done. So yeah, my mother, she said, why do people like Harry Potter? How could you stand to read Harry Potter? I said, I read Harry Potter. I loved it. Made me feel like I was 6 years old again. And that's a gift. At my age, at the time Harry Potter came out, to be able to feel that magic of when you're 6 years old. So, every book has something in it that's probably worth your time. It's a matter of, you aren't going to want to read every book, and you may not want to wade through everything finding that one book. But I really hesitate to write off any one thing except gore. Any one genre as not having anything worthwhile.
I think we needed someone here then to give you the top 5 gore books. And
have you read any gore books?
I tried gore.
I tried.
Gore paid for just about every new author that Daw published. It funded their experiments with new talent. So I do not care for gore, but look at all the writers that we do have, because gore existed. Fed the bottom line.
That's interesting.
What did you check out, Jarrod?
Oh, for the gore?
Yeah.
I think a long time ago, it was I don't know, one of the first, I don't remember, like the Warlord of Gore or something like that. I don't remember the names, but it was like the first novel in one of his series there. And it didn't do much for me.
Gave that one to Mallory.
Yeah, Mallory.
If you remember that. Yeah, gave it to Mallory.
To your point, Jose, I think, well, I don't read erotica or romance necessarily, but I do think romance is it's starting to become more of a sub genre of fantasy. I think more fantasy authors are incorporating romance into their books. But I think you mentioned like the appeal of erotica in text when you can get on the internet and in a few clicks pretty much get into whatever you want. But it kind of gives me hope that people still enjoy that delivery, I guess, with not being, because it feels, I guess, how can I explain this? It's a different type of appeal, I guess, in text or whatever. So I think it's kind of nice that not everyone is falling into the trap of just getting on and getting online and in 5 minutes seeing whatever they want. Rather, they're taking the time to read a book and to even though there's usually not a whole lot of surprises in a romance story. I think it's still encouraging that some people still take the time to read the book and to I don't know if I'm not conveying this very well. I hope it makes sense. But
No,
anyway, I'm going to shut up now. So
No, because I've got
No,
another.
the sound is failing a bit, so I probably missed off.
So my dad was a lecturer at university, and
Sorry, the sound on my end is all scrambled up.
Oh.
I was just gonna say. Now everyone froze.
Oh.
Are you back? Okay.
Okay.
No, I was just gonna say that reading is more for women. That's why it's so popular amongst women. Men, they are more visual. Women, they need to
read read westerns under a male pseudonym on page 35, guaranteed. The men have their own, but they don't call it that. Trust me. Trust me. Go through an old box from a Salvation Army sale of old westerns that were written in the 50s, 60s, back when men only wrote westerns, and I can tell you it doesn't read the same way as women's romantic fiction does. It's definitely seen from a male viewpoint, but I'm telling you, it's there. It's just not crapped on.
No, I'm curious.
So yeah, have you ever read a John D. McDonald book or what was the guy, Brad Pitt? The men's fiction section. What my dad read. We used to swap books around all the time. He read my Dean Koontz and I read whatever he had that he was picked up and took on his business trips. So yeah, it's absolutely there. Just it's not called that, and women don't spend their time poo-pooing it because, frankly, the publishers made a lot of money on those books. Watch a James Bond movie. Don't tell me that's not male romance. It's absolutely the male idea of what they would. So, why are we drawing fences around this is terrible or this is women's fiction and it's its own little territory and men don't participate in on their side of the fence? Because as far as I can see, they do. And I don't have any problem with that.
No, me neither. Conan now comes to mind to some degree, but yeah,
There's not much sex in Conan.
It's just no.
Although all that Conan had to do for the women to fall for him was to smack him about a little bit, isn't it? Every single woman in the Conan stories would fall for him straight away.
What?
Yeah, that's why I said, isn't that sort of like the male fantasy that women just kind of fall at their feet? I don't know. I'm digressing here, way past my original point.
I don't remember a whole lot of smutty sex in Conan. Sorry, it was more heavy-duty action and implied. But I don't remember heavy-duty smut in Conan at all.
Yeah, no, not as erotic or romantic. It was a bad example. I'm sorry. It was more the sense of, because we're talking about 007 and as the man's man, my mind went there.
My mind went a long time ago. Don't worry about it. You're in good company.
Paromita, since you brought up the question, do you have any recommendations for romance or for erotica?
Unfortunately not. The ones I've tried have not really worked for me.
Well, wait for my premium list. I have to go to the loft and see which titles survived. But you know, how many men are watching Outlander right now?
Oh,
Sorry, but when that bugger came out, that was romance. No question about it. That was romance. Absolutely romance. So, and now the men are all watching the TV show and loving it, and they're reading the books, and I'm seeing some booktube channels pick it up. So, you know, an interesting book is an interesting book, but it was certainly marketed as romance, and that's certainly where she made her numbers, Diana Gabaldon, when she came out. And in fact, I got a quote from her, and my British editor goes, you don't want to put that quote on your book. She's an American romance writer.
really?
And yeah, she was like, no way. She was being a British, you know, and now, boy, has the attitude come 180 on that one.
Wow, because I read the first Outlander novel, and I found it to be more historical fiction than anything else. It had romance in it, and it was a little bit of fantasy to start with, but for me it felt more historical fiction than anything else.
The women were not reading it for the historical fiction. But the point is that it had more appeal than just that. A book that lasts like that has more appeal. But I'm just saying, look, when the men are saying, oh, I would never touch a romance book, but they're all watching Outlander.
Yeah, I definitely watch it. It's a good show.
I can't
Does
watch
Outlander
it.
have time
I love
travel?
the books. I can't watch the show. Yeah.
It does, and people were reading Outlander as romance that would poo-poo on fantasy, but it's full of time travel. So, you know, what are you going to do? I hate boundaries and lines. I hate arbitrary. It really pisses me off. So every time somebody starts saying generalizing, I'm going to start pushing back. I'm going to be a big fat devil's advocate, because you're shutting off some really cool experiences, not unilaterally, but why be prejudiced?
Well, I suppose because the human brain is categorical, isn't it? And whatever experience you may have had with certain areas, you then just paint with the same brush everything else in that category. So if your entry into whatever genre you care to name has been not a positive one, you will just brush all of that under the same stroke.
I agree with you, Jose. And I mean, to give you the example of, one which is perhaps a bit more male reader centric and one which is perhaps a bit more female reader centric. The male reader centric one is Sword and Sorcery. Every book I have picked up, other than Elric by Michael Moorcock, I have like shuddered to my bones at the male gaze. I have just shuddered to my bones. And it does not mean anything about the author or about the books or about the readers who enjoy. It's just not for me. And so I cannot continue on this futile quest of reading more into something which I clearly don't enjoy. And the same with romantasy. I'll just call it romantasy, and then it will include Twilight and ACOTAR, which are the two series that I've tried. I read the whole of Twilight, which is 4 books, and then I read the first 3 novels in ACOTAR, and it was not for me. And so I'm not really motivated to go trying for more unless someone really comes out and says something else is good here, hence. But if that is the main appeal, I'm going to pass. Because, as you said, like, time is limited and shelving does help. At least it helps me a lot. Like quantifying, categorizing, using metrics, it helps me a lot to make reading choices.
Did you know that there were female authors doing Sword and Sorcery?
Yes, I have read it. I did not like it very much either.
There was more than one.
I think the one that I've read, I continue to have the issue that I have with Sword and Sorcery. So,
but there was
I'm
more
not
than
going
one.
to.
There was more than one Sword and Sorcery writer that was female. Just saying.
I'm not disagreeing with your point, Ms. Wurts, but I am saying that I don't think the genre is for me.
For Sword and Sorcery, which authors would you recommend, or what to check
What
it for someone who wants? Yeah, for someone wanting to look into it.
It's a really mixed bag, and a lot of them have fallen by the wayside, like the Lankmar books by Fritz Leiber.
Oh, I like those.
Yeah, there were women. Hardly anybody I know of has read Jane Gaskell's Atlan series. Definitely Sword and Sorcery, totally different. Again, I'd have to visit the loft to make you the list of what's survived. But when people go, "Oh, Sword and Sorcery was only written by men," that's totally not true. Just the women have been erased. They've been erased. I would say early on, Andre Norton would have been considered, her Witch World would have been considered very Sword and Sorcery. And she's been extremely erased, which is a pity.
Yeah. Didn't CJ Sherry, didn't she do
Well, if you're thinking of the Gate of Yvrel,
yeah.
it's very Sword and Sorcery, but sort of blends into science fiction very quickly.
Yeah, it does,
That
yeah.
book still holds up in many ways.
That was a good book, yeah.
She really has a knack for psychological interrelationships. And I would say The Expanse really stood on the shoulders of her Alliance Union universe, and she has never, ever given credit for that. A lot of the themes that you see in The Expanse, C.J. Cherry did ahead of you. The only element that's missing from the main sequence of her series, of which there's 20-something books or more, there are a lot of them, is it didn't go quite as deeply into horror. You'd have to read her Outer Beyond part of that Alliance Union universe for horror. And some of the scariest books I ever read was one of her Out of Beyond. Terrifying. It's about an alien encounter that's just, whoa, it's off the scale. Scary book. So yeah, she's almost been forgotten now, and it's a pity. She was one of the first women to win a Hugo. Her work was very well received at one time. She did a major epic fantasy, which is lovely, Fortress in the Eye of Time, which has a great deal to recommend it, and it certainly has an original theme. So, yeah, it almost makes me mad because the Alliance Union universe would have been filmable every bit as much as The Expanse. And she didn't destroy the Earth doing it, but that one's almost never recognized. In fact, one time I mentioned that in a forum, that I felt that was an incredibly powerful precursor to that series, if not, it didn't influence it. And boy, did everybody, I got a resounding thud of a silence. It was like nobody wanted to hear that anything could have come before that. But her work is well worth a read.
Yeah. And I think even back in Howard's time, there were some female writers for Weird Tales,
There were a lot of them.
if I'm not mistaken. And a lot of times they used initials instead of their full names. And
They
stuff.
didn't have to use initial. Kate Wilhelm didn't.
Oh, that's right. Yep.
It wasn't as misogynistic back then in fantasy and science fiction because there were so few readers. It was a very small family, and everybody read everything that everybody wrote. And in fact, I would say that the avoidance of female bylines got very powerfully influential with the internet. It began at 2000. It began with the rise of paranormal fantasy romance. And it began with the misogyny that's invaded the internet. Because we ended up with a lot of the societal flaws. The more readers we got, the more likely that was going to be amplified. But in the earlier days of science fiction and fantasy, totally women's names were not as pushed aside as they are today. And that's one reason why I did not go with a gender neutral or male pseudonym. If I was doing that today in a heartbeat, I would have switched course. But you can't do that in the middle of an 11-book series. So yeah, this is a recent thing. It started around 2000. I watched it happen. And it's a train wreck.
That's interesting.
If you talk to writers who are self-published who actually sell their books, women who sell their books over the table at conventions, Krista Ball is one, and she will tell you if the readers are at the time 45, probably now pushing 50, they're going to read the women. They will come up to her table. They will buy the books. They will listen to her. But the younger crowd below that age group wants nothing to do with a book that was written by a woman, and she sees this on a daily basis. So I've watched it happen, and I've certainly got opinions about it. I don't like to harp on that as a big deal, but it is a problem. And it wasn't always the way it is now. It totally was not. So it came about with paranormal romance fantasy. It bled over into the very successful YA fiction where women were expected to write YA. I had editors telling me to abandon what I was doing and write YA. I'd have no problem making a living. And I'm going, I'm not writing for children. I've never written for children. Why should I change that now just because? So the perception of many readers is if it's a woman's byline, then it's going to have all this romance in it, or it's going to be werewolves in fiction or whatever. I don't know. Or it's going to be YA, and I have nothing wrong with those kinds of books. Let them have their place. But if you look at the entire arc of what women are writing, that's only a fraction of it. It's just the fraction that the public sees. Prejudice hurts all of us.
Does that come from, at which level does that come from? From the reader, from the agents, from the publishers? Because sometimes, like in movies, we see when big studios think that they don't want to take risks, so they start meddling with projects and they end up delivering subpar products, which we are seeing recently. Is it something similar in the publishing industry?
I think it's endemic to our society because it's layered into everything that happens. I mean, women authors are referred to by their first names, not their last names, and male authors are not. Women writing very deep, intelligent books, they're going to get more slamming reviews. They're going to be more critically reviewed because people coming in don't expect that. And then when they see it, there was a thread, yesterday in our fantasy, or 2 days ago, and it said, give me your list of $20 fantasy words. And what they meant was authors who use big words. And the first person that got to the top of that thread was Gene Wolfe. And there was a list this long of words that author had used that no one had heard of. And I read the list and I said, wow, there's some words on this list I don't even know. And I've absorbed so many from reading so many books that I take criticism for my vocabulary. But what was interesting is Gene Wolfe is universally lauded for writing books with complex language, complex concepts that you cannot skim, that you have to read very, very carefully to absorb what it is that he's saying. You might even have to read the book twice to get what he's doing. A woman writes a book like that, and I guarantee you she's going to be digging against the stream, let us say. So I don't know what to do about it. I can't solve it. I just made the decision when I saw it happening, beginning to accelerate post-2000, that I wasn't going to let my voice be silenced. But it is certainly a problem. And the only way to fix that problem is look at the books on your channels that you're talking about. Look at your fellow people doing channels. How many of them put out their first quarter books, and 90% of them are male? Books that are pulled up as examples in conversation. How many of those books are by women? There was a woman in Egypt who wrote the very first novel ever written that they found in recorded history was a woman. Surprise. Mary Shelley wrote the first science fiction. Somebody pointed out to me a woman author who did the first mystery that was the precursor to Sherlock Holmes, and a lot of the mystery writers of that time, they all read her work and were influenced by it. But I guarantee you, I had never heard of her name, and you probably haven't either. So it's curious how many times women have created a genre or broken the mold, and they're not the ones remembered for it.
But
it's interesting.
Is it the case that maybe, I don't know, X, Y, Z of female author has success in a certain genre, and then publishers are just looking for copycats, not copycats, but like the same thing. They're just trying to replicate a formula. So if you're a female writer, you are meant to write like Anne Rice, bringing the whole romance into vampires. or Stephanie Meyer with the whole Twilight saga, again, teenage romantic vampires. So female authors are just expected to write in the confines of what has been successful before because they're trying to replicate that. And
That's part of it. That's part of it. The other part of it is a lot of the future of a book is going to be shaped by the size of the initial advance. More than not, and I don't want to name names because I absolutely don't want to say anything about my peers that could be interpreted in a not so good way. The size of the advance equals how hard the publisher is going to market and push that book to keep it successful. So women have never been paid the scale of advances that men have. Not in those areas. In the areas you were mentioning, Jose, yes, but not in the areas where I'm talking where women have a hard time. There are other genres where they have an easier time, no question, and a male writer would have a harder time. Depends. But that preset expectation is very hard to break.
Sorry, I'm just wondering where that comes from. If it's driven by the audience, or is driven by the publisher in this case.
Somebody just mentioned to me, how come, and I forget the woman's name, she wrote a book called something about the single wife. I forget the title and I forget her name. She outsold The Great Gatsby by a lot. And yet everybody's heard of The Great Gatsby. Nobody's heard of this woman. I can't explain why this is. It's just that it is the way it is.
Yeah.
I don't have the answers.
Yeah. Even if you did, it would be a very long answer, most likely.
Well, I think part of it is, I think journalizing and putting people in boxes and saying this was successful, so let's try to replicate this. Kind of like what you mentioned, Jose, about just like Hollywood. I think they see a certain type of movie being successful and they try to make just a factory of the same kind of movie, and it just doesn't.
I think 99% of the problems are invisible. If you look at what happened to certain orchestras where they went to blind auditions, where the musician played behind a curtain and the people deciding the audition for that symphony could not see the person playing, their percentages of women went to 45% in the orchestra. And I figure 45%, it's not 50-50. Some women are raising families, okay? So that you will have some attrition because women have pregnancies, et cetera, and can't maintain a concert schedule. But blind auditions are a thing. There was one really well done write-up of a woman who had tried to submit to agents for years. She decided as a lark in a fit of pure fury one weekend to change her pseudonym to a male pseudonym and send them out to the same agents. She had 4 responses before the weekend was even over to send the whole manuscript, or this shows so much promise, get it on my desk by Monday. And as a woman, she had spent 2 years under a female name trying to do the same thing. So there are enough. What was the other one that was striking? It was someone who had started presenting as male and was writing academic papers and went through a transition, put out papers under the woman name going forward, and actually had peers tell them, well, her brother's work is better.
Jeez.
Yeah. So I could go on all day with examples like that. But I mean, if there was not that invisible, I'm not pointing fingers at the people who are alive today saying, oh, you go around all the time just squishing women. You don't. It's inbuilt. I don't think people even realize they're doing it. It's the expectation.
Yeah. It's a systemic problem.
Yep.
Wow.
What was it? When I was growing up, there was no girls' aisle and no boys' aisle in the toy store. You could go in and it was all the toy aisle. It was Disney that started dividing the aisle between little boys and little girls. And look what that we're paying for that shift right there, because that's girl stuff. Don't be caught in that aisle. Whereas when I grew up, there wasn't a divided toy aisle. The cars were on the same aisle as the dolls. Didn't matter. You went for the toy you wanted, and there was no gender attached. So things have truly changed, and marketing is responsible for a lot of it.
Jose,
I get really angry with this. Go on, Paromita.
Jose, when you asked the question, I was thinking, and I thought of 4 examples, and I think it was actually the publishers to answer your question, whether it was the audience. It was little bit of the audience. Certainly, I was the audience for 2 of the examples that I'm talking about. One was Harry Potter. When Harry Potter came out, I remember when maybe we were waiting for the 5th or 6th book like this. Bookstore was flooded with like Aragon, Artemis Fowl. There was one more series which was very popular. Aragon, a cover I remember clearly. Artemis Fowl I remember clearly. But I mean, there was that tremendous search for the next Harry Potter. Then was, I don't know whether, I think then was Twilight, because the first book came out. It was tremendous success. Then is 2011, the show, Game of Thrones.
The Hunger Games was in there.
I have not read the Hunger Games.
No, so but I mean, that was in that, and the Anne Rice books and the vampire books were before what you were mentioning with the Harry Potter. So there were a lot of books that came out that made big marks that affected the current of what was happening. So go on, Paromita. What was?
So the third one was Game of Thrones, and then there was this. I have seen it repeatedly on blurbs. Something Game of Thrones or something meets Game of Thrones. And the last one, which I think is still ongoing, I don't know whether the Game of Thrones is ongoing, but this one is ongoing, is Madeline Miller with Song of Achilles in 2011. It became popular a bit later, and then Circe was 2018. And that is Greek retelling. And now it is flooded with Greek retellings. I mean, there's Ariadne, there's Electra, there's things. So I think there is some kind of attempt to motivate something that is selling well, if that can be replicated, and if that can find an audience. Because Aragon also did very well. As I didn't read it at the time, but I remember it was very popular. And Artemis Fowl I also liked very much. So maybe it built into that craze a bit. I don't know. Game of Thrones is very hard. I have not read anything which has anything that has been blurbed as this is Game of Thrones. I have not found that vibe. Same with Harry Potter.
The distribution market, where the distributors like Ingram's and Baker and Taylor used to warehouse the books. So the publisher printed them. They would send them to the distributors' warehouses. The distributor would in turn distribute to the bookstores. About 2010, the distributor said, we don't want to pay for the warehouses anymore. We're going to downsize. Now the publisher got to warehouse everything. They did it just like that. And the publishers are suddenly, we don't have room to warehouse all of the books. We only can warehouse what just came off the press. They were triaging books. They were forklifting through pallets of books to move them out of the way to make room for the front list book that they had that was coming off press, and destroying books because the middleman said, we don't want to warehouse anymore. We're going to cut that expense. So the impacts, these are just a fraction of the impacts of what modernization has done to major publishers. So when you say, oh, it's a dinosaur, they couldn't react fast enough to the downsizing. Originally, the department of a publisher would have had 12 people working, and they would have had an in-house proofreader, an in-house copy editor, in-house marketing people. The staff that ran a publishing house that were actually employed by a publisher was pretty large. Doubleday or one of those big houses before they all crashed together and merged. Now they outsource all of that stuff. Your editors are running a department on maybe 3-4 people. They're so overworked, they're frantic. They're not being paid much more than what you would feed your collie. And they're in meetings all day, profit and loss meetings, marketing meetings. They're doing all of the electronic stuff that their higher ups don't want to do. So they're running the internet. They're doing all the stuff with the tech that their seniors don't want to do. And they have no time even to read. They're editing on the subway. They're editing on their weekends. So the difference in what downsizing and what the corporate profit model has done to the actual running of the industry is just horrendous. It's bad. So yeah, Paromita, you were wondering why there's an echo chamber going on here. The profit and loss statement, the Harvard business model, the insistence that on 20% profit, and those 4 people in that department, they don't dare say anything against corporate because they're out of a job. So they play the corporate line to keep themselves going and hopefully go up the corporate ladder. But it's a mess. It's a mess. It's nothing like we do this because we love it anymore. It's almost, how can you keep a job like that and still love books and come out of it enjoying what you do every day? It's insane.
Indeed, I had no idea. So
Yeah, so the people caught in the gears of a major publisher who are not the front list, who are not the next Game of Thrones, who didn't get the 6-7 figure advance, they're faced with the same problems the self-publishing people have, but they don't have your community. So it's crazy. So to me, it's like we're all in this together, and working together we can solve it, and working together we can help each other, and putting aside those prejudices, we can do more for our readers and our creators. But it's going to take a village.
Yeah, I get really upset whenever it's. I understand that it's probably well intended, but whenever people say, "Oh, here's the best, fantasy written by women or sci-fi written by women," or even in shops, online shops, you do have, the women's section usually now piled up with our GTB session, which is, let's not go there. But if there's one activity, one thing that it really doesn't matter if, to write a book, it doesn't matter if it's man or a woman writing it. Why make this distinction? And really, really, yeah, personally upsets me. Because I don't care for the name of the author. Possibly, I think my favorite authors are actually men, but that's because it's so hard to find. I'm taking notes and names. It's very hard to find anything that I would like that are written by women in those genres. And unless it is on those lists, and it's usually the Greek retellings. Yes, let's not go there either. Just keep popping up. And it is a shame. And I really feel it. Had I known that it was that bad, I would not have used my name. Because it's really not working in my favor at all from the beginning. And it upsets me. It makes me sad more than upset these days. I'm just resigned.
Generally speaking, and obviously at the risk of being at the risk of generalizing, male authors and female authors tend to have different strengths. So, like someone like Robin Hobb does amazing character work and amazing character.
Excuse me, she changed her byline
Exactly
mid-career. Have you ever read Megan Lindholm?
I know.
Did you ever read? And it was a carefully orchestrated move.
I am aware, but the point I was trying to make is that for the way, I'm just a humble reader, she seems to be stronger on the whole.
How many female authors have you written that are not writing within the lines of what's considered female strengths.
No, I think that in general, like I've read, Robin Hood, Trudy Canavan, Ursula Le Guin, they tend to be stronger on the character work, whereas male authors tend to be stronger maybe on the action set pieces, maybe on the sort of plot side of things.
Guy
And
K smashes that argument to bits.
I said, I did preface the whole argument at the risk of being, at the risk of generalizing. Obviously, you can always find in your normal distribution of authors, you can find your things. But I think in general, there are subtle differences in there.
I will say, Jose, as a reader, I personally, especially in science fiction, not so much in fantasy, but in science fiction, I try to seek out female authors because sometimes the things that are there by male authors, sometimes, as you said, like your first 2 or 3 entries in a genre are, tainted, and then you're just put off. So that's why I try to seek out female authors. In general fiction also, I try to seek out female authors. I think they speak to me more. Not the classics, not like very old ones. Old ones, actually, Dickens is my favorite. But in contemporary general fiction, I have had more success with female authors. And I do enjoy what is labeled as women's fiction in the general fiction category. I mean, I quite like it. And I mean, yes, I have not tried I don't think there's anything called men's fiction, is there? I don't know.
No.
But
Yeah,
but
there
I mean,
is.
There is.
But I mean,
There
if
is.
there's women's fiction, I quite enjoy it. So I don't know. Like as a reader, I've found something which will give me some good recommendations, and I'm happy. That's sort of my limit of my take.
So yeah, I would say, Jose, go read Stephen Donaldson's A Mirror of Her Dreams and A Man Rides Through. It will not have the rap that his Covenant series does, even though everybody says, oh, the one scene. That book has more depth in it, and it was the least gratuitous rape scene written anywhere in fantasy, but you're not going to fight the uproar you'll get on the internet. Read Morden Sneed for character work. And I think you'll find there are male authors who do incredible character work.
Even the second Covenant series, his Lyndon Avery character is just outstanding. And
yeah, for a psychological depth, I mean,
Yeah.
the Covenant series absolutely does its job. And if you read the essays that Donaldson wrote as to what he was actually trying to do with that series, he was trying to illuminate how the subconscious mind works and how we put aside the beautiful parts of ourselves and we focus on the ugly.
Yeah.
And he wrote an entire series that absolutely demonstrates that gorgeously well. But modern readers come along and knee-jerk throw their modern opinions all over it, and until it obscures the incredibly powerful thing that he did when he set out to write that work. Yeah. So if you don't want to read that one, which has that rap all over it, go read Morden Sneed. And if you want it really dark, go read his Gap Cycle.
Yeah.
But Stephen Donaldson does exemplary character work, so does Guy K. And I could compile you another list of male authors who do incredible character work. It's just they're not going to necessarily be the top of the clickbait bestseller lists. Because I think some readers don't look for that in a male written book. Doesn't mean it isn't there.
Are you muted?
You muted, Jose.
Oops, sorry. I was going to say, there's an idea for your YouTube channel, Janny's Loft, where you come up with lists of books from your stash of books up in the loft. Because you need
my loft, yeah. I've read so many books. I have read so many books. I read the library before I ever discovered science fiction and fantasy. I was reading The Agony and the Ecstasy at 14 because it was on my parents' bookshelves. I read Deliverance because a high school teacher gave it to me. Boy, that would make DeSantis's head explode. So yeah, I've read everything upside down and sideways, and doesn't mean that I loved everything I read, but it was an education. I grew up reading Black writers too, and I think it changed how I think now for the better, because I didn't discriminate. I read historical fiction, I read mysteries, I read women's books, I read men's fiction, I read sword and sorcery, whatever I could get my hands on, I was reading it. So that's why I get crazy when the algorithm just drowns stuff, because I see people all the time, young, bright, erudite booktubers saying there was nothing worth reading in the 90s or the 80s.
That's horrible.
And I'm going like, this was pre-internet. It's because you don't know what was really there.
Yeah.
So that kind of opinion just makes me explode. And it doesn't mean that though everything that was written was dated or had male gaze or had embedded values. There was every kind of experimental work being done then. It just didn't sell because not in quantity. It was happening on the fringes. So I've often said the best work, the most revolutionary work still happens on the fringes. It doesn't reach the mainstream center until somebody else does that idea 20 years later. So there's a wealth of stuff nobody's discovered that's certainly as good as anything being produced today.
No, I can see that for sure. I can see that for sure.
So I just look up now, and I didn't realize it's been 2.5 hours. I know it's getting late for all of you on the other side of the world, but before we go, Janny, will you tell us where people can find you?
If you spell my name correctly, last time I looked, I was the only person with that spelling of my name anywhere. So you'll find my website. I'm on Twitter. I have a Facebook fan page, so there's announcements goes up there. I'm on Steve's forum. I pop in and out of our fantasy now and again. I have a Goodreads account. I will see a message sent there. And I have a forum for Paravia. It's small and it's kind of quiet, but so I'm there too. So I'm not hard to find. I'm not one of these people who has to build a fence. I love readers and I love talking to them about any kind of books.
My list always grows whenever we have a talk. Like 20 tabs open with books. And Susana, where can people find you and your work?
I'm mostly on X these days, Vero and Facebook as Chronodendron. But if you Google my name, you'll find the website, and I'm on Goodreads as well, and of course, Page Chewing Forum. Not hard to find at all, and I also love to talk to people, so get in touch. I always reply.
And Susana is in the day 200 and something on the 365-day challenge. I think you're
172, right? I think. Yeah, I'm on the last 100. I will do it.
Yeah.
Determined.
Well, what we're referring to is on Vero or on some sites, you take up a challenge to take a picture every day and post it, and for a whole year every day. Just it's a way to I don't know, just to be creative and do something every single day. It's not always some days, but yeah. So that's pretty neat. So everyone go check that out for those of you who are curious about it. Jarrod, where can people find you and your
It's
channel?
very nice there.
I'm at the Fantasy Thinker on YouTube, and I am also that's also my Instagram handle if anybody ever wants to find me there. And I'm also on the Page Chewing forums quite a bit. And
Jarrod has an excellent blog on the Page Chewing forum, on the front page WordPress. So everyone go check that out for sure.
Creative Crossroads. That's what I called it. Yeah.
And Jose.
Yeah, thank you. I'm on Jose's Amazing Worlds on YouTube, and I've got an Instagram, but I'm thinking of closing that down because I hate social media, so I'm not going to promote that here. And also, obviously, on the page, Chewing Forums.
Nice. And Paromita.
I'm around on the page Chewing Forums almost every day, so I can be found there.
Awesome. Well, thanks to all of you for hanging out. I know the time just flies, and before I notice, hours later. But thank you everyone for coming by, and hope everyone has a great weekend. And we'll talk to everyone soon.
Thank you for hosting, Steve.
Thank you so much for having
Bye-bye.
me. Hosting.
Thank you.
Had a great time. Bye.
Thank you.
It was
Bye.
great meeting you guys. I will put that list of books up
Oh yeah,
on the page Chewing Forum. I will do that.
we were waiting. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Smart recommendations from Janny Wurts.